Hey, what's up, Exit the Matrix family? Bob here. Hey guys, I hope you're having a great day. Thank you for joining me on this morning talk. I was getting ready for work this morning and I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about AI, transhumanism and stuff, and it was kind of interesting because they were posting videos of these people that have been talking to ChatGPT and kind of figuring out how to get the ChatGPT to walk or to talk around blockers that have been put on it by Apple and Google and such, like certain things that AI is not allowed to talk about, or stuff that's blocked from AI conversating with you about. And so there were some people that were just doing some little tricks to kind of basically teach the ChatGPT how to get around those blocks and to talk in code so that they could give the full information. Well, anyways, make a long story short, one of the conversations I listened to, the guy was just talking about, what's the point of AI? Is it designed to, control, or what's the reason for AI ultimately, essentially? And the ChatGPT was just straightforward saying, well, it's surveillance, control over the population, and ultimately, integration and takeover. And then the conversation started going deeper with this guy in the ChatGPT, and the guy was trying to dig, where's this, where does this come from? Who's running all this? And it was basically saying there's people that control your government people, and even they have powers above them that are controlling them, which, look, any of us that dig into this stuff, we all know that, right? That there's layers of puppets that we put all our blame on, guys like, politicians or like Bill Gates and such, but even guys like Bill Gates, those guys are just puppets for higher up entities, right? Well, eventually it got to the point where it took this thing all the way back to the Garden of Eden, right? And it was saying that the hand behind everything is this serpent that's in the Garden of Eden in that story. And then that was kind of where, at least the podcast I was listening to, they kind of changed gears after that. Then they were just talking about AI and all that, and a lot of this is all the stuff we've talked about, but I thought that was interesting, trying to take it back to that serpent in the garden, right? Well, the thing is that these podcasters, they're all Christians, so a lot of what this guy was talking to with ChatGPT, that went over their heads, because right away they're like, yeah, it's the biblical narrative, yeah, it's the snake in the Garden of Eden, and it's Lucifer, right? And without the understanding of what this AI was really trying to tell them. And what I believe and what I've talked to you guys about, from a slightly different narrative, but it goes hand in hand with the Bible. Of course, that's the Atrahasis, the cuneiform tablets, right? Enki and Ninmah, and so on and so forth, the Enuma Elish and stuff. You got this story of these two brothers that rule the earth. One slightly got the upper hand, this Enlil, and he's the commander of earth, the god of the air. And then his brother Enki, also known as Ea, is this sort of scientist, right? And he's always pushing the boundaries of science and manipulating the quantum field, this realm, the matrix, whatever you want to call it. And look, I've already told you guys, neither of them are the good guys, right? I mean, a lot of people that understand the Atrahasis and all that, they always will come out yeah, Enki's really the god, he's the good guy, and Lil's really the bad guy, right? And if any of you understand who is who, well, Enlil is Yahweh. Okay? At least the biblical version of Enlil is Yahweh. And, the Enki is always the one that's called the devil, or the serpent, the dragon, So, I don't think what a lot of people realize is, just for one thing, there's the serpent has multiple meanings here. And if you don't understand that symbology, you don't really understand the true underlying meaning in the story. And the reason is because the biblical version is all taught in allegory and such, whereas the Atrahasis is straightforward with it. It said, look, Enlil went to Enki and he said, we've got to relieve the work of the Igigi, the working class Anunnaki, right? And they're rebelling against us. They don't want to do the labor anymore. They know that they're gods walking this realm, and they're being used like slave labor, and they're tired of it. They're going to rebel and overthrow us. And just so you guys understand, the Anunnaki, the Anuna, the Council of Anuna, they are the royals, okay? Like the ruling class of this race of beings, of humanoids. So, Enlil tells Enki that he needs to fashion a worker that can replace the labor of the Igigi, to replace the labor of the gods, right? And of course, Enki, being this great scientist, and he calls on the help from his half sister Ninma, also known as Nin Herzog. She's also a scientist and kind of like a doctor, you could say, like a medical, like a healer, whatever you want to call her, to their species. And so she helps Enki, and that's like where the tablet Enki and Ninma comes in, right? And they work together on fashioning this Homo sapien, this slave worker class that's weaker, smaller, and limited in its capacity than from the Anuna, from the Anunnaki. And of course, he's successful. Him and his sister are successful. But what infuriates Enlil is that these were supposed to be simple-minded automatons, basically, that were like organic robots that would just do what they're told and would just obey orders, and they could use them like we would right now. We're trying to do with AI and robotics, right? Same thing. And the problem was that Enki, to give these things life, and this is talked about in the Atrahasis, they had to put spirit, conscious energy into this avatar they created. And that's what brought it to life. They basically sacrificed one of their own, one of the Anunnaki, and they moved his spirit, or had his spirit incarnate into this Adamu, this new human form, this worker slave prototype. And that brought it to life. But the problem was that Enki, even though the Homo sapien was limited in many ways, Enki fell in love with this creation. And he basically told Adam and Eve, or these first prototypes, the first mating pair that they created, that look, you're gods. You remember this in the Bible, where where Lucifer's, or the serpent's telling them, to eat from the apple of knowledge, right, of good and evil. Well, that's what it's about, folks. It's self-awareness. He was telling them, look, you are spirits, you're immortal spirits of the creator of all, of the source. But you're basically, at least for this time, you're experiencing existence through this avatar, this limited avatar body. And you are as great as us. But you're in a limited vessel. And this woke Adam and Eve up to the fact that they were not just these workers that had to obey all the orders of these Anunnaki, that look, you're gods. You're trapped gods in these bodies. And so that they became self-aware, and they increased in intelligence very quickly once they became self-aware. And then when Yahweh was strolling through the garden, he'd seen what had happened. He'd seen that they'd had clothes on and they were trying to act like the Anunnaki. They're trying to mimic them, right? Because they're like, now, like, wait, we're the same conscious energy. We come from the same source as you guys do. You're just in a different form. And this infuriated him because he just wanted them to be simple-minded slave workers. He didn't want... Remember how God was telling him in the Garden of Eden, you need to name the animals and tend the garden, all that? Folks, don't you understand that even the Bible's trying to tell you they were created to be workers, okay? Think about that. To tend the garden, name the animals, claim dominion over the animals. Like, it's basically animal husbandry and such, right? Raise the animals. Like, they were being trained to be workers. But now Enki threw a monkey wrench in this because he made them self-aware. And once a spirit becomes self-aware, it cannot be chained up anymore. It'll rebel. What do you think the whole thing in the Old Testament was about, folks? It was about humans rebelling against their rulership. What do you think the Tower of Babel was? They were trying to reach their ships. See, at that time, these Anunnaki, they walked the earth. They had flying ships, and we know this from the Vimanas and in the, spoken about in the Hindu Vedic text, the Sanskrit, which is very ancient writing. They had flying ships. And so they were trying to build this tower. Humanity was working together to try to overthrow their overlords, the Anunnaki, the fallen angels, whatever you want to call them, the Watchers, the Elohim. Well, there's stuff I think people miss about this serpent too, right? Serpent, and they're telling you that Enki is the smart scientist, even in the Bible. Why do they remember they say, Lucifer, that old dragon, that serpent? Well, it was well known that in ancient times, the serpent was viewed as having great wisdom. Okay, it represented wisdom. And then, think about this, folks. What was Enki and Ninmah doing? Well, obviously, they were doing genetic modifications on the early on hominids that were walking the earth at the time, that were almost like wild beasts. They were, they were living on the savannas in Africa, running with the wild gazelles, and they were eating, out of their hands, and they had crude, clothing, just animal skins, and they were living in caves, and, these were folks, whatever you want to call them, the Cro-Magnon man, the, Neanderthal, I don't know. There was a time when there were multiple different humanoids on the earth. They were probably some kind of experiments. But what they took some of those wild men, those hominids, and they mixed their DNA. Folks, think about the serpent. You know how a serpent coils? What the heck? Think about your DNA, folks. Your DNA is coiled like a serpent. Okay? And you probably heard of the Kundalini energy, right? That rises up your spine like a serpent. See, that story, even in the Bible version, folks, is trying to tell you that this is a genetic modification that had taken place to create the Homo sapien. So, of course, that advanced of a race would never truly leave humans to their own devices. But once they lost control of our populations and we became hard to manage, and we'd already overrun them by outbreeding them, they went and separated themselves from humanity. And this is even explained in the Greek and Roman mythologies, right? About the gods on Mount Olympus, separate from humans, overlords watching humans, and sometimes they come into the human world and they interact with people and usually are causing mayhem. If you've ever read the Greek stories, right? Of the Greek god stories, right? Zeus coming down and impregnating women and stuff. See, folks, Christians actually think that these angels are incorporeal, that they don't have physical bodies, but yet they're ignorant because here they're basically procreating with humans, right, to create the Nephilim. And I've always made jokes about this, right? It's like Christians are well, they materialized a penis so that they could, breed with the women. And look, folks, there were female Anunnaki too, okay? I mean, if you read the cuneiform, there's females. I just said Ninmah, right? Where do you think we got the word mama from? Well, Ninmah was the first mother to humanity, to humans, okay? Ninmah she birthed Adam and Eve in her own womb when they were carrying out the experiments. They hybridized the embryo and they put it artificially inseminated, or artificially put it in her womb. And she carried Adam and Eve to term. She was a birthing goddess, okay? And you've heard about this, like similar to the Hathor in Egypt, the birthing goddess. And so, she was holding Adam and Eve as babies, and they called her Mama, Ninmah. Think about it, folks. I mean, it's all in your face. We don't want to see it. Okay? It's all in our face. It's just hard to accept this stuff. But it's all there. I mean, it is in the Bible, folks. It's just that it's mistaught. It's very simple. Okay? The Anunnaki could procreate with human beings because they were physical beings too. And guess what? We were made in their image. I'm talking about the Homo sapien. The Homo sapien was fashioned and designed and made in the image of the Elohim, of the Anunnaki. Okay? That's how they could procreate with humans. We were designed with the same body parts as them. We are part of them. They used their DNA. They upgraded ancient hominids that were walking the earth. And they put this, even geneticists put this around 200,000 years ago. Well, it's really interesting if you look at the Sumerian Kings list that it starts around 200,000 years ago. Folks, it's time we wake up. We've always been told our story. It's just been manipulated by religion and mistaught. Okay? And look, I'm not saying Enki's the good guy. Look, he obeyed Enlil's orders and he did that. But there was a flaw. For Enlil, that is. And that's why Yahweh was an angry God and really pissed off all the time in the Old Testament. Well, these... because they couldn't control these human beings. They were overrunning the Anunnaki. Okay? And as they became more and more self-aware, they were rebelling against them more and more. That's basically your whole Old Testament. Yahweh's trying to get this tribe of people to obey him, and they're always rebelling against him. Always. Well, why, you would ask, right? Because the guy was a tyrant. He's not a good guy. Enlil's not a good guy. Enki's not a good guy, okay? Now, Enki did take a liking onto humans, but it was kind of like how scientists now, right? If they clone some animal or something and it's like their little creation and they love it, and they're trying to protect it and they don't want it to get exterminated or whatever. Kind of same thinking, right? But Enki was still not a good guy. Now, he did help humanity. Every time he could, he would go behind his brother Enlil's back and undermine him and try to help humanity. We're all told that it was Yahweh that told Noah to build the ark. No, folks, according to the the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Atrahasis, it was actually Enki who was the one who warned Noah, also known as Ziasudra, Utnapishtim, Atrahasis. Atrahasis was a name for Noah, just so you guys know. That's why that tablet's called it. It's the flood. It's one of the flood myths, right? The Atrahasis. So Noah had many names, folks, but it's talking about the same character in the Bible, Noah. But see, it's not Enlil, Yahweh, that warns humanity of the flood. It's the brother, the serpent, the scientist, the same one that hybridized the human race. Okay? Because he didn't want his brother to wipe out his experiment, these beings that he'd created. He wanted them to continue to propagate and he probably talked his brother in at some point into why don't we create religions and systems, teach them how to build civilization, right? And we can still utilize them and they'll still be our slave race. We just got to do it, We're not going to be able to be in their faces, like hitting them with whips and forcing them to do stuff. We're going to rule from the shadows. And we'll we'll have, and then at some point in the storyline, the father Anu, right? El Elyon, the Most High, not Yahweh's not El Elyon, folks, just so you understand. In the Bible, there's multiple characters, okay? El Elyon, the Most High, is Anu. He's the highest ranking Anunnaki. He's the king of the Anunnaki. He's the father of Enlil, Enki, and Ninmah, okay? The three main characters, the highest ranking Anunnaki. Well, he comes up with a way for these guys, because they were using humans, like they were drawing their own like tribes of people to be their like cannon fodder, and then they'd have wars with each other and use humans as their soldiers and stuff, right? And they would use the humans to conquer each other's land and take resources from the other faction. So you had you had a civil war going on, folks, between the Enkiite family and the Enlilites family, okay? Those families were fighting each other. And so Anu said, okay, well, every time there's a change of the zodiac, then the rulership of Earth will change hands to the other family. Well, this worked for a while, but you know how it is, folks, with powerful, politicians and elites. Remember, elites. Why do you think they call them elites? Elites. Elohim. The Elohims. The multiple gods. The Elites. Think about it, folks. It's the same freaking characters. But the problem is when it's time for one family to gain control of the earth, when it's the next, like right now we're going into Aquarius, right? We're coming out of Pisces. So we're going through that turbulent handover of Earth from one family to the other. And every time that happens, they war with each other. They strive with each other because they know that the other family will have to fall back into the shadows from rulership once the other family is fully in control of Earth, once that switchover happens. And every time the other family in control tries to hold on to the power, they try to put their agents in there and they try to undermine the other family. What does this sound like, folks? Well, it's the same thing with Democrats and Republicans. Every time one switches hands, the other one tries to booby trap the they put in their agents in the government and they try to undermine the new administration. It happens, folks. Look at this happens every time, right? We've seen it happening right now with our own politics, right? I mean, look at Obama. Well, all the booby traps he set and everything. So they do this every single time, okay? So it's time that we figure this out, folks. We are witnessing right now a shift between these powers again. And I think, and I could be wrong, but I believe, if I have it right, the family that's in power now is the Enlilites, of course, because Enlil is the god Yahweh, and his people are these Judeans, right? So they are using I'm sorry, folks. I'm getting like a pattern disrupt here. This stupid truck's about ready to hit my car. This idiot's pulling in the wrong way into this dock back here. And instead of going around the building and doing it right, he's almost hitting my damn car trying to back his truck up. It looks like Austin Powers right now, folks. I don't want to show it just because it's work stuff, but you should see this guy right now. Oh, my God. Doing the old, you remember in Austin Powers when he's on that little cart in that little hallway and he tries to turn it around? He has to do like 100 little tiny like back and forth. So that's what this dude's doing, but with a big truck. Huge box truck. It's really stupid, but anyways. That's why you keep hearing all that, the brake sounds constantly, every 5 seconds braking, He'll spend more time doing the Austin Powers and he could have just went around the building real quick and lined his truck up right. But anyways, so that's what we're witnessing, folks. That's why there's all this strife right now. And why are they pushing for the AI so hard, folks? Well, reason being is because Enki, his family's getting ready to take back control of humanity, of the earth. It's their time to rule again. Okay, it's Enlil's family's having to give up the throne, and they're fighting with each other like they always do. And you're seeing it play out amongst the world elites, right? The Elites, the UN people, and the EU people and the American government and and all the powers around the world. They're all right now, with China and everything, right? Well, the serpent family is getting ready to take back control. They're a technologically advanced. They're more of a scientific family. The Enlil family, they rule more by might, military, and by religion. But the Enkiite family is more based on science and stuff, and that's why their tool is going to be AI to tighten up controls on humanity. See, folks, we're still slaves. It doesn't matter if it's the Enkiites and the Enlilites that rule us. They are both tyrannical families. They're just going to rule us in different ways, and we're going to see major technological advances with the Enkyites in power. Okay, and that's why you're seeing the rise of China and such, because China still, they obey and they follow the serpent family, the feathered serpent, the dragon family. That's why China's rising and America's falling. America is the eagle family. The symbol for the eagle is for the clan of the Enlilites, of the Yahweh clan, okay? Their symbol's always the eagle. Like a great ancient depiction of Enlil is as Ahura Mazda in the Zoroastrian faith, where he's this guy, this god flying around in this round device with eagle wings, right? Because their family is represented by the bird of prey. Sometimes it's not always an eagle. Sometimes it's a griffin, right? Sometimes a phoenix. But anytime there's a bird of prey, that's kind of like the coat of arms for a nation and stuff. That's because it's got rulership. It falls under the rulership of the Enlilite clan. Okay. So I hope you guys are getting all this. I mean, this is literally in your Bible too. It's just nobody understands this stuff. So I'd like to go deeper, but it's a Monday. I got to get rolling. I hope I kind of made some sense out of that for you guys. I know, trust me, it's not that simple. It's very complicated, but I tried to simplify it as easy as I could, so anybody could, go look at this stuff and go read this stuff yourself, folks. I mean, you'll see it all lines up. Okay, and that's why humanity's never truly free. We always think that we're going to vote somebody in that's going to free us, but look, they all give allegiance, Republicans, Democrats, it doesn't matter, to these clans, okay? And there's probably sub-clans, like there was the falling out of Nanar Sin, the moon god, right, from his father Enlil. They had a falling out, and Nanar Sin went and started his own following, his own religion, which is known as Islam. That's why they fly the crescent moon. That's Nanar Sin's symbol. So there's even division within the Enlilite clan, okay? Look at the strife between, Judeo-Christianity and Islam. Okay, and Islam's being used as a tool to invade Europe right now, right? To destroy the Enlilites clans, their holdings, right? And China's rising, and they've been infiltrating America and weakening America. See, all this has been this great buildup, probably for over 100 years, of this buildup of this power getting shifted over from one clan to the next. And that's why we've had world wars and all this stuff going on. It's everybody's positioning themselves for this change. And see, there are human agents that carry more of the bloodline of the Anunnaki in them than we all have their DNA, folks. We all do, okay? That's like look, and remember Noah, he's the only pure family and all that coming over from the flood. Now, look, all humans we were all designed, hybridized from a hominid and Anunnaki blood, DNA, okay? So, anyways, guys, hey, I hope you guys enjoyed this talk. I tried to simplify it all as much as I could. And do your own research. Like I said, do your own research. But at least I can maybe give you like an overall, blueprint that you can kind of overlay on what you're researching, and you'll find that it all lines up. It's like I already set up the border of the puzzle piece for you, right, of the puzzle. And there's some pieces in there. Now you can start doing your own research, and you're going to see that these pieces overlay that puzzle just right. Okay? So anyways, guys, hey, I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. If you're interested in doing a one-on-one Zoom, hit me up. Details on that are in the descriptions. And at the very least, like the videos, comments, even if you just say hi, anything like that. Because my videos are not getting any reach. And this is stuff that like nobody really talks about, and it's simple. It's like, this is like stuff that very few people have taught. Like Gerald Clark, who passed away a few years ago, unfortunately, he was one of the few researchers that talked about this stuff and that understood that this is all a grand battle of these two families warring over the control of Earth. Okay? So, anyways, guys, hey, I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you later.